she would need.
Right.
And she cuts me off and says, "You don't understand. In order to get the contract, we need to hide the code. This is for flipping the vote in South Florida."
This is the same Tom Feeney who, as Speaker of the House in 2000, claimed that no matter what, the Supreme Court said he was going to give the electors to George W. Bush.
Yes, that's the guy.
The same Tom Feeney, as I understand it, who was Jeb Bush's running mate for governor back in '94, when Jeb lost, by the way.
Yes.
So Feeney did him no good.
Did him no good that time.
That time.
There
You're
go.
right.
And so Feeney was basically feeding us contracts and saying, you know, can we do this? Can we do that? You know.
Okay.
I was kind of the technology supervisor. If we could do it, then I would tell them, and we could run whatever, you know, little test pattern they wanted for us.
Jeb was already governor at that point?
Yes.
2000? Okay.
Jeb was already governor.
When I was contacted by Clint, I said, well, would you be willing to put this into an affidavit, a sworn affidavit? Since a lot of this stuff off the bat is still difficult to prove, especially that nugget of that meeting with Tom Feeney and the vote rigging software is still largely a he said story.
On December 6, 2004, Clint Curtis filed an affidavit with Congress alleging that one of their members, Tom Feeney of Florida, had asked him to create vote rigging software.
He asked you to design a code to rig an election.
Yes.
While he was Speaker of the Florida House.
Yes. When we filed the affidavit
Right.
in December, the dog turned up shot the very day we filed that. So I don't know if it's a threat or more of just we can do whatever we want whenever we want it kind of a statement.
The day that I broke the story, Clint Curtis's affidavit, I had been awake for 3 days straight. I was so creeped out by this entire thing that I couldn't sleep. The same day that I broke that story, I got a phone call from Clint in D.C. saying that his dog had been shot. And I thought, oh man, he's, you know, Clint's gonna, with this kind of crap happening, he's not gonna want to continue, you know, telling this story. He said to me, no, you're damn right, we're going to keep reporting this story, and we're going to keep, you know, I'm still going to continue talking about what I've learned.
Yang's attorney quickly released a statement claiming that Mr. Curtis's allegations are categorically false and that Clint Curtis is a disgruntled former employee.
I have heard, Clint, that you were a disgruntled employee of Yang, and that's why you've been making these claims.
That was their original excuse until I produced, and I think it's on your blog, isn't it? This card, which they gave me, which said, you know, come back anytime, the door will always be open.
This is what Yang said to you.
Well, the actual owner, Mrs. Yang, wrote that.
I'm wondering if Mrs. Yang is available. This is Brad Friedman calling. Any idea when she might be available? I'm working on a story on deadline. Is there a spokesperson for the company that might be able to answer some questions? Hello?
This meeting with Tom Feeney, where he asked you to create what is essentially vote rigging software for electronic voting machines. Tom Feeney is in the room, you're in the room, Mrs. Yang, the CEO, is in the room. Anybody else in the room?
Mike Cohen.
Who is Mike Cohen?
Mike Cohen was the executive secretary for Mrs. Yang. He was basically the note taker.
Mike Cohen, the executive secretary for Mrs. Yang, whom Curtis claimed was at the vote rigging meeting, told a reporter from Wired that the meeting never took place.
And I called him and said, hi, this is Brad Friedman. Brad, yes, Mike Cohen, I wanted to ask you a couple. Brad, I don't want to be impolite. I'm going to hang up the phone, but I don't want to. But Mike, I'm wondering, can you, Brad! And he just would not let me get out a word. And then he hung up. And I guess he doesn't want to speak to me.
If they really tried to put out a program to do vote fraud,
right,
the minute they checked the source code, they'd see it.
It sounds like you presumed that these counties, these states, and so forth would examine the source code before it was actually used in an election, correct?
Well, yeah.
But they do not, correct?
That's what I've heard.
What did you think when you heard that?
That I should tell people what's going on. What he wanted was a program that would flip the vote. And this is what I produced, basically. It looks like that.
You've compiled essentially a prototype program to
Yes.
show how somebody could, in fact, if they wanted to, use the touchscreen software to flip the vote.
Correct.
Is this the actual program that you built for them?
No.
So
the
you don't
NASA
have the
contract.
actual software that
No,
you
I
wrote
just
for them?
rewrote a duplicate of it because it's real simple. It's like 100 lines of code. This is a little garbage program that I wrote for Feeney. You don't see the actual vote count. So you walk up. Who do you want to vote for here? Kerry is winning a little bit, okay? You come in, you vote for Bush, you vote for Bush, you vote for Bush. Always adds by one. Vote for Kerry, vote for Kerry. So the people that are going to be validating this machine can stand there all day long and vote for somebody, and it will be right every time. Pretty simple, okay? But the guy could walk up here, and if he hits the right buttons, he can flip the vote that easy. So the whole vote total has changed. You could have 20 people standing behind his back while he's poking at a screen, and you never saw it.
What's the percentage that you worked out to for
51-49.
51 to 49.
Because it's under the recall. Close enough, you don't have a recall. When I actually wrote it, it wasn't Bush Kerry, it was cat and dog, I think, or something like that.
I think the voting should still be done on paper because it's way too easy to manipulate computers.
Jesse Jackson and I were on a speakerphone with Mr. Kerry, and we told him. Mr. Kerry didn't really respond to what we said about Ohio, but he did point out that the OptiScans in wherever they used them in New Mexico, he lost regardless of the Democratic and Republican registration. He said, it sure seems like I lost everywhere they used those machines.
Why didn't you leave the building with a copy of the source code to prove what had gone on?
Because it's a secured site. You don't do that. We have government contracts, and nothing is supposed to leave the building.
It is more difficult to get into the Yang offices than it is to get into a government office.
Really?
Yes. I was an employee of the Department of Transportation.
Florida Department of
The
Transportation.
Florida Department of Transportation. The department entered into a contract with Yang, I believe, in January of '99. I had known Mrs. Yang since approximately '94, '95.
Did she ever tell you how she came to hire Tom Feeney?
She indicated to me that now that he was in politics, that they had hired Mr. Feeney as her general counsel.
Did that strike you as odd that a company doing business with the state would hire the incoming Speaker of the House?
It struck me as odd that an individual like this, in addition to being general counsel for a vendor, would also be the registered paid lobbyist for a vendor. And Mr. Feeney was both for Yang Enterprises. His political campaign offices were in the same building where she had her offices and the building in which she owned. Something was slowly going wrong. The invoices from Yang began to escalate every time I would reject an invoice and say, no, this is not what we agreed to. Here was your authorization, that's all you can bill. We'll have to discuss this with our general counsel, Mr. Tom Feeney. He's the Speaker of the House. So they began using his name, trying to intimidate me.
Did you have enough of a concern about it to go to anybody and say, hey, this doesn't seem right?
Since he was Speaker of the House and a member of the House, I'll call the House Ethics Committee and said that, you know, I was having a problem and there may well be political influence, and how did they handle these things? And they told me that Mr. Feeney was the person who would review it and either accept it for review or throw it out as being not worthwhile.
Wait a minute.
And I said, I'm complaining about Mr. Feeney. And they said, we don't have any way to bypass him. The way our committee is set up, Mr. Feeney is the one who will evaluate your complaint. For one of our elected politicians to use the power of his office for self, that's not supposed to happen.
Prior to getting introduced to Feeney,
Right.
they just seemed odd. Things were odd. You know, they had people sneaking up the back stairs, and they were downloading information from NASA that didn't seem like they should be doing that. You know, things like this.
They had a NASA contract, correct?
Yes.
And they have to have sort of top secret clearance to have this
I would
contract?
assume they must have some clearance, because, you know.
Did Feeney help them get that contract?